Page, please. Rowan lay on her back in bed, being careful that the sheet covered her. Ryan lay beside her, fast asleep, his hand lightly touching her. Lines of text were displayed on the ceiling over the bed. After Homo sapiens were inducted into the Republic, it took 210 Earth script 1 years to transport the switchboard end of the Homo sapiens Stargate into place. There was some debate among the Homo sapiens pre-existing colony worlds about placing the gate in the Sol system. Subnote 2. However, in the end, an underlying sense that the home world should be honored won out. Others claimed that the colony worlds were skeptical about being induced so thoroughly into the larger universe. In general, their ancestors had left Earth to get away from the bureaucrats. It is likely that both views factored into this decision to place the Stargate in the Sol system, subscript 3. During the gate's transport, Homo sapiens relayed numerous messages through the gate tow ship's FTL telegraph. Thus, the day after the UES gate was in place, the sale of Jupiter to the brachiopozoids, subscript 4, was finalized. In exchange for Jupiter, the brachiopozoids agreed to advance Homo sapiens technology to the galactic average over the next 100 Earth years, an advancement for Homo sapiens at that time of roughly 40,000 Earth years, given their rate of development. Problems arose with the purchase when the brachiopozoids attempted to claim Jupiter's moons, as was in keeping with Republic tradition. The Homo sapiens pointed to the exact wording of the sales contract and the fact that Jupiter was in their home system, where Republic law granted their laws precedence. This was the first appearance of Homo sapiens before the Republic court. The younger species showed themselves to be both cunning and aggressive, greatly impressing the Council of Judges. Subscript 5. In the end, the decision was granted to the Homo sapiens, who promptly exchanged 3 of Jupiter's least valuable moons with the brachiopozoids to serve as staging areas for the bioforming of Jupiter. The Homo sapiens received the planet, the planet now known as Niliki, in this secondary trade. Thus, 2 linked systems house both Homo sapiens and brachiopozoids, much to the ongoing annoyance of the brachiopozoids. Subscript 6. Subscripts: 1. The Homo sapiens home world. 2. The Homo sapiens home system. 3. Known as yellow 125 degrees 227 by the pre-Homo sapiens induction classification. 4. See the Space Traveler's Guide to Brachiopozoids by Sokrapit. The Comprehensive Guide to Hydrogen Breathers by Red, Blue, Blue, Yellow. Translations are available from Universe Books, Inc. 5. Chief Justice, large fluked tail with yellow stripes and a bulbous nasal appendage, was quoted as saying, "Divine, just what we need. Another set of Weevilzoids with a history of massacring their own kind in addition. We should annihilate them now and save everyone the trouble later. However, in this case, I find in their favor. As most species have become acquainted with Homo sapiens, they have come to wonder if the Chief Justice had experienced the precognitive episode. 6. In fairness, it must be stated that the brachiopozoids have benefited from the Homo sapiens' presence with the near total eradication of space piracy in these systems and the security of having aggressive defenders of their system autonomy." Ryan stirred, stretched, and pulled Rowan close to himself. "Morning, beautiful." "What you reading?" Rowan relaxed into his brace. "The Space Traveler's Guide to Homo sapiens, the historical reference section. I wanted to get up to date." She shuddered as his fingers traced lazy patterns over her body. What time is Red Blue expecting us? Ryan took a deep breath and released it in a sigh. Too soon. I'm quite sure. What time is it? It's 0800, Hottie Boss. And don't stop on my account. That's a show I'd love to watch. Henry's voice blasted from the speaker. Red Blue isn't expecting us until 1000 hours. Henry, what's Tim up to? Dr. Pratt is still sleeping. Good. Henry, use my voice and call Katoy. Ask her if she'd mind keeping an eye on Tim while Rao and I handle the trading. And don't get fresh with her. Remember, you're pretending to be me. Ryan turned to face Rowan. Tim hasn't spent much time with other species. He'll probably need a tour guide. Rowan smiled as the cover shifted above her arm. And I'm supposed to act like I can't handle the modern era. I'm glad we don't have to rush. She squeezed. Ryan gasped as color rose to his face. Henry, privacy on. Ryan resumed caressing Rowan. Stardust. Henry shifted to his secret feeds and continued to watch. Tim sat at a table in Westnaki and gawked at the aliens. Ryan and Rowan sat at a counter against one of the transparent walls, speaking with a calentrozoid. Ryan tells me you do life support design. Tim focused his attention on the cougar tan feline zoid that sat across the table from him. He tried not to think of her as pretty, tried to admire her like he would a cougar in a zoo, with only partial success. I will mention Katoy looks like a cougar, bipedal, about 6 feet tall, and she's considered petite. Yes, I've also worked on nanobot enhancement to biological systems. Katoy swished her tail in a friendly manner. My father was a biomechanic. He maintained the waste processing plant on SMA. Sorry, I don't think the translator referenced that one. SMA. Katoy looked confused as she tried to understand the word the human spoke, untranslated. It was missing several inflections that went beyond the human hearing and voice range. When she figured it out, her tail swished and her pupils widened slightly. It's the third largest city in the Graf province on the southeastern continent of Meru. The translator doesn't always handle proper names well. Tim closed his eyes. If he just listened to Katoy, he could imagine he was speaking with a human woman, someone from a different culture than his own, but human nonetheless. I remember when my father was stationed on Swampa. My mother and I lived in the embassy there. Some Otterzoid insults would take over a minute to translate. You'd never think it to look at them, but Otterzoids are really foul-mouthed. Tim smiled at Katoy. I know, I have an Otterzoid friend. She visited me after she and her mate had a fight one day. The nanos were still translating 3 minutes after her lips stopped moving. It was really funny. Katoy swished her tail. Tim became serious. I appreciate you babysitting me for Ryan and Rowan while they do the trading. I've not spent much time off Earth. And all this, he waved, indicating the bar with its mix of species. It's rather daunting. Katoy swished her tail. My pleasure. Ryan is a good being, and doing your employer a favor never hurts. Won't it be odd for you living on a human ship? Katoy's nostrils dilated and she looked at the table. Tim was fascinated by the changes in her facial expression. In time, he was sure he could learn to interpret them as he would a human's. Katoy's voice was weary when she spoke. Probably, but your father is willing to hire me and pay me a decent wage. I've heard all the stardust about Homo sapiens being promiscuous and violent and smelling bad. It's all stardust. I like Homo sapiens. I have lots of Homo sapiens friends, and my late husband was Homo sapien. Timothy was sipping at his drink and sputtered, sending a shot of liquid out his nose. Katoy stood and patted Tim's back as he gagged. Finally, he gasped out, I'm sorry, your husband was Homo sapiens? Katoy looked at the floor. That shocks you? I loved Kadar. He was the finest male I've ever met. I miss him so much. She caressed the red sash she wore. I'm sorry. It caught me by surprise. Timothy's revulsion surged. The idea of touching a flying zoid like that was something that belonged on an e-entertainment, not the real world. The thought frightened him, even as it intrigued him. He looked at Katoy's face, saw the sorrow there, and his disgust was followed by his compassion. Sometimes I forget that he's dead. He was in prison for so long. Our only contact letters. The time we had before that, though. It was so special. Tim tentatively stroked the fur on the back of Katoy's hand. She looked at him, her lips curled to reveal her teeth in surprise. Then her expression softened. Please don't do that. She swished her tail. I know for Homo sapiens it's a way of showing concern, but for feline zoids it has a different connotation. Tim let go of her hand as if it burnt him. I'm sorry. That's all right. Just so you know, you're a good hand massager. Katoy swished her tail and her pupils widened slightly. Tim blushed. I wonder what's taking my father so long. Scene change. Rowan sat and watched the calentrozoids through the transparent wall. The shadowy forms of different hydrogen-breathing species moved in the background. You want far too much for your product. I'm sure legitimate trade channels will make it a common substance soon, spoke the translator in response to the flashing multicolored lights that surrounded the calentrozoid's caprice. The final lie on top of the being's other negotiating tricks were too much for Rowan. She let her temper show. If you feel that way, why did you agree to meet with us? There are other places we could be. Why waste our time? And float down to our level. No one's intimidated by you staring down at them. Homo sapiens have used that one for millennia. What did you expect when your blatant flattery didn't work? That you could intimidate us? Really? Is it customary for a captain to allow their subordinate to insult a client among Homo sapiens? Red Blue's communication lights blinked rapidly. Ryan looked at the being and shook his head before replying. Rowan is my trading officer. She can do what she sees fit. It's her job. He smiled at Rowan, whose entire attention was focused on the alien on the other side of the wall. The large shipment of orange oil recently obtained by the anti-proton generating station in the yellow 297 degrees 102 system has reduced the substance value. Red Blue's tone was belligerent. Stardust. That shipment was a one-time supply. Your species is unlikely to get another. A smart being is going to stock up. Rowan stood in motion for Ryan to join her. We're wasting our time here. I think we should see Segal about selling the rest of the coffee. He's probably sold enough of the first to afford it by now. Rowan bowed sharply at Red Blue, then stepped away from the wall. Red Blue trembled where it floated. The lights around its caprice flashed quickly on and off. No, please, my mating group must have the orange oil. We are going extinct. Rowan smiled with her back turned to her client. Schooling her expression into a serious mask, she turned back. The oil we traded for anti-proton will at least alleviate Zod's problems. Your population should be able to interbreed with your homeworlds and restore genetic stability. Don't try to make me feel guilty. My mating group is not like the others on Zod. Red Blue sank down so that its light ring was level with the human's eyes. How so? Asked Ryan. The hydrogen breather's light rings blinked slowly. The voice from the speaker was dispassionate. 4,000 Zod years ago, a heads-up display on the transparent wall printed 53,000 Earth years, when Zod was colonized by century ships from Ika. Many of the colonists were religious extremists. The sect my ancestors followed was very strict and felt that it was wrong to mate with those who did not believe exactly as they did. Thus, they formed a closed mating group. We did not even mix our genetics with others of the population of Zod. For my mating group, barely 1 in 100,000 fry spawn survive to adulthood, 10 times worse than the other mating groups on Zod. Worse, even other Zodians are unattractive to us. The only hope my mating group has of surviving is if we can obtain a supply of orange oil so that we may mix genetics with calentrozoids from the homeworld. That is sad, but we have problems too, said Ryan. Rowan resumed her seat and stared at Red Blue. He's right. We'd like to help. We aren't in a position to take a hit on the price. My mating group is doomed to extinction. We are not wealthy and cannot afford the price being charged on Zod. I cannot pay what you are asking. It was only good fortune that the ship I work upon was at the station when you arrived. It will tax my mating group to cover the shipping costs alone. Rowan looked at the floor, then smiled. Why take all of it then? Could you afford half the cases at our stated price? Red Blue swished its tentacles. The lights blinked excitedly. Yes, but don't you wish to sell the whole shipment? I sure will find a buyer for what's left. Rowan wagged her arms loosely below her chest. Red Blue waved its tentacles happily. I will pay 40% of your asking price for the whole shipment for half the shipment, please. Rowan smiled and moved to a console built into the counter in front of the transparent wall. I'll draw up the contract on one condition. You supply storage for the other half of our shipment until we find a buyer. Agreed. Red Blue waved its tentacles and twirled around once in place. Captain, you have a potent negotiator in this one. I hope you appreciate him. Rowan glanced at Red Blue, then shrugged and finished filling out the contract. I do. As a matter of interest, I am a male Homo sapiens. Rowan is a female. The female tends to have bumps on its front and is usually slightly smaller. Ryan smiled and wagged his arms as he spoke. You creatures with two genders always confuse me. No offense intended. None taken. Rowan finalized the contract. Red Blue pressed one of its short tentacles into a scanner plate, and the deal was struck. That should, at least, cover your first session with pikemen, observed Ryan. We did better than I expected. I kind of figured on only getting 70% of the asking price, though finding another buyer is Nova blasted. Rowan fell silent as a spiderzoid the size of a large dog scuttled up to it. Scuttled up to Ryan and lay its clawed-tipped leg on his shoulder. Think a tarantula the size of an Irish wolfhound. Pardon me, are you a Homo sapiens? The spiderzoid's translated voice was childlike. Keycon, no, please, good sentient. Please do not hurt my hatchling. He means no offense. A full-size spiderzoid rushed to the child's side. Ryan sighed and looked at the child. I am a Homo sapien. He directed his gaze to the parent. You have nothing to fear from me. The young one was simply getting my attention. No worthy being commits violence for so little cause. Is it true Homo sapiens kill their own species? Asked the young spiderzoid. Sometimes it is considered an affront to social norms and is vigorously punished unless sanctioned by the state. Kika, leave the Homo sapiens alone, please. The parent clicked its impressive mandibles together. Honored sentient, do not fear. The great warrior philosopher Finn Mac Cumhel said, 2/3 of thy gentleness be shown to women and those that creep on the floor, and to poets, and be not violent to the common people. Those that creep on the floor means children. Wow, is that a Homo sapiens thing? Kika shifted position so it could gaze at Ryan with all its multifaceted eyes. They are an ancient set of guidelines for living with honor as a warrior, the maxims of the Finna. What did you wish to speak to me about? The adult, still clicking its mandibles, spoke. It is a school project. Each student is to interview a being from another species. I brought Kika here hoping he would choose a hydrogen or methane breather, but he is fascinated by Homo sapiens. Please do not take his interest amiss. Ryan sighed again and pressed a button on the counter in front of him. I pledge under Republic law, I will not harm you or your child this day unless you initiate hostilities against me or my companion. My statement is recorded. Will that alleviate your fears, good mother? Thank you. Kika, be polite and don't waste this good sentient's time. Do you mind? The parent held up a black circular device the size of a toilet roll. You can record me. Is it okay with you, Ro? Of course. Rowan stood beside Ryan. Thank you, good sentience. Kika scuttled into one of the cushion chairs, which configured so that he could lay on it with his 10 legs dangling. The parent pushed a button on the side of the tube. It hovered at eye level, focusing on Ryan, Rowan, and Kika. You're welcome. My informal name is Ryan. This is my friend Rowan. Ryan gestured to Rowan. Rowan reached forward, took one of Kika's clawed feet in her hand and gently shook it. It's a pleasure to meet you. The clicking sound of the parent mandibles filled the air. Mother, it's a formal greeting for them. I read about it. It means they aren't carrying a weapon in their dominant claw. Kika sounded excited and exasperated. Oh, well, if that is its meaning, the mother continued to click her mandibles. I read that Homo sapiens have two genders. Are you a mated pair? Asked Kika. Ryan smiled at Rowan. She gave a little nod. Yes, newly mated. Could I record your mating practices? Rowan blushed. We hold all but the most introductory of our mating rituals to be a private matter. The introductory rituals can be found by looking up the words kissing and dating on the database. Ryan's voice was soft and comforting. Oh, Kika sounded mildly disappointed. Have either of you served in the state-sanctioned murder societies? Rowan's brow wrinkled. I've done military service. I was a captain in the UES Spacing Corps. Ryan sounded haunted. Did you ever kill anyone? Yes, the sound of the mother's mandibles coming together with a snap echoed across the bar. Why? Mostly because they were trying to kill me or someone I had to protect. Sometimes because I was ordered to by the UES government. Killing is never a good thing, but sometimes it is a necessary thing. A soldier obeys orders unless they clearly violate Republic law. How do you do it? Keep living. Doesn't the remorse drive you insane? Kika clicked the claws in excitement. Sometimes it's difficult. You must remember I am evolved from omnivorous predators. My species is omnivorous. Killing animals is a natural part of our existence. Ryan looked at the floor. I do have regrets. Rowan placed her hand on his shoulder. Maybe we should talk about something else. There are lots more to Homo sapiens than our military. We have family, people we love. We've had brilliant artists and writers. It's fine, Ro. It's only natural that he's curious. Spider-Zords are pacifists by nature. Savages like us and the Flying Zords are a mystery to them. The adult Spider-Zord stared at Ryan and Rowan with all her eye facets. Her mandibles had stopped clicking. I didn't mean to disturb you emotionally. I'm sorry, said Kika. No need. One learns to do what they have to and live with the regrets. That is a big part of being a Homo sapien. Ryan smiled at the child. If you say it is so, it is so. Given your species' high aggressiveness rating, why do you think you survived your technological adolescence? In part because the rating is artificially high due to the inclusion of mentally ill individuals who kill for nonsensical reasons. In part because we learned long before we gained the capacity to destroy ourselves that there are two types of warrior, the warrior of defense and the warrior of aggression. The warrior of defense protects those that cannot protect themselves. He or she stands as a shield to uphold others' safety and or rights. The warrior of aggression does what he or she does for their own benefit. Those of a high moral nature fought to keep peace and safety, those of a low for their own betterment. As such, we found a balance that curbed the worst of our excesses. Wow, Kika clicked his claws excitedly. When are you not killing other sentients? What do you do? Ryan laughed. The two Spider-Zords looked at him, obviously taken aback. I spend most of my time repairing spacecraft. I'm an engineer. I also enjoy reading and an activity called skiing. What are your pastimes? Kika turned to Rowan. Me, I'm learning to navigate Ryan's ship, and I like swimming. I also like to read. What are your thoughts on the enslavement of clones to make mentally intrusive entertainments for beings to experience delusional states? Rowan took a moment to think the question through. It's a disgusting practice that reduces clones to being a thing and the people who experience into exploitive monsters. Ryan cringed at her words. Ro, over the top, don't you think? No, it's not over the top. Oh, Ryan, not you. You're different. You grew up. Kika, I think that is enough. These good beings undoubtedly have other things to do today. There was resolve in the mother's voice. But mother, Kika's voice was wheedling. Kika, 1, 2. The adult spiderzoid rubbed its first set of forelegs together. I'm coming. Thank you, Ryan and Rowan. I really liked the interview. I'll get a top rating for sure. You're welcome. Ryan and Rowan spoke in unison. And I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'm going to see if I can record this too, just to make sure that it gets recorded. Nope. All right. As long as you're recording it. Well, my name is Paul Levinson, and thanks for coming to this reading. I'm going to be reading for you from my short story, It's Real Life. It was published a couple of months ago. You can read it actually for free on a site called Vocal, that's VOCAL. So if you enjoy the reading and you want to actually see the story in the flesh, or in printed words, you can just go to Vocal, search on my name, and search on It's Real Life, and you can read the story. I should also mention that this is a short story, but I am now developing a novel called It's Real Life, and that will consist of this short story and a bunch of interrelated stories and chapters. So let me call up the story. Here it is, and let's begin. That's Real Life from the Beatles' 1985 Come and Go LP, and I'm Pete Fornatel on WFUV's July 4th, 1996 week-long celebration. Pete sighed with a mix of all kinds of deep emotions as the song played. Every time he played that song, every time he heard it, he felt like crying, and his eyes burned right now. The song was not only heart-tugging and beautiful, but profoundly unsettling, and he felt that he, Pete Fornatel, the disc jockey, was somehow connected to it. The Beatles were close to breaking up. Lennon had made that clear in his long interview with Pete's colleague, disc jockey Dennis Elsis, earlier this year. McCartney had too, in what he had said about his solo song, My Brave Face, co-written and co-performed with Elvis Costello. The first time any Beatle had done that with a non-Beatle, but no, that was not the reason Pete felt this unspeakable sense of foreboding about the Beatles, about Lennon in particular. The last part of that song rang in his ears. It's real life, it really is. Yeah, Pete put another piece of vinyl on the turntable. That was still his favorite way of playing music. Here's one of my all-time favorites, he said. George's All Things Must Pass from the Beatles' 1994 Band on the Run LP. They brought in Nicky Hopkins to play piano on that one. Pete hoped the song might make his foreboding pass. Instead, it only made it worse. Pete looked at the stained analog clock on the wall. He had just 12 minutes left to his show. Maybe he'd take a walk in the tunnels below Keating Hall at Fordham University. That had always cleared his mind when he first started walking there, back when he was a student here at Fordham University in the 1960s. And he found it cleared his mind now too, since he'd returned to Fordham and WFUV about 2 years ago. No one knew exactly when or why the tunnels had been built, likely near the end of the 19th century in one of Fordham's many expansions, so students could go from one building to another without getting frostbitten in winter or drenched in the spring. There was a rumor that Edgar Allan Poe had something to do with constructing these tunnels, and one of the tunnels did go straight to his home up on Kingsbridge Road. Well, not likely that Poe had actually constructed them or had anything to do with their construction, but who knew? Poe's cottage on Kingsbridge Road off the Grand Concourse definitely was real. On this Tuesday after July 4th, the tunnels were danker than usual, but Pete didn't mind. He was kindly disposed to the fungus or lichen or whatever it was on the walls, and he found the dankness was part of their charm. There were all kinds of stories about what existed, what could be done in the tunnels, ranging from ghosts to teleportation portals to Pete's favorite. He'd encountered it in a science fiction story written by a professor in the communications department a few years ago about how the tunnels actually were conduits to alternate realities. Pete felt vaguely relieved. The very thought of alternate realities somehow made him feel better. Maybe he could get to an alternate reality where he wasn't plagued by this inchoate feeling of dread about John Lennon. He'd been thinking so hard, he'd walked a little further than he'd intended in the tunnels. He didn't recall seeing that thick wooden door before. There were plenty of them here and there in the tunnels, but they always were locked. He once asked a maintenance guy in Keating what was behind them, and the guy had said, cleaning supplies. This one wasn't locked. Maybe someone on the maintenance crew had left it open accidentally or because he was in the middle of a job. Pete couldn't resist. He opened the door. All he saw in front of him was another tunnel with no sign of cleaning supplies. Pete walked through the door and in the tunnel beyond for a few minutes. He saw nothing unusual, same mottled walls and the occasional door bolted shut. He looked at his analog watch. He'd been in these tunnels too long and realized he was now in danger of coming late to his appointment with the WNET people, which was set to begin in just an hour. The meeting was important. They wanted Pete to host a retrospective on the Beach Boys. They were another one of his favorite groups. Pete looked back on where he'd been walking. He needed to find a faster way out of here so he could catch either Conrail or Fordham's Ram van downtown, depending upon where he was able to exit. Pete knew there was more than one exit. He'd used multiple exits ever since he started walking here in the 1960s, and there was one. A different kind of door, not bolted. With any luck, there would be a steep flight of stairs upward on the other side. And there was. Pete sprinted up the stairs so fast his legs hurt. He opened the door to a soft rain. It wasn't bad. He squinted and saw he was on the west end of the campus. All right, it would be Conrail to Manhattan. Pete had no idea what its schedule was, but the trains ran pretty often. He walked quickly past Duane Library towards the train station. Pete loved that old library with its winding steps to shelves overcrowded with books. He heard a train in the distance and quickened his pace. It was definitely coming from the north. It would be close, but Pete was good at catching an arriving train. He knew he could pay on board. He dashed past the ticket booth, nearly collided with an elderly woman, and apologized over his shoulder. He rushed down the stairs to the tracks just as the train came into the station. Pete walked through the open doors and smiled. He always really enjoyed these last-minute boardings. He sat on one of the worn cloth seats and awaited the conductor. A woman soon approached in a tight uniform and a book of tickets. Grand Central Terminal, Pete told her. She nodded. $5, she said. Pete gave her a $5 bill, and she reciprocated with a ticket stub. As she walked away, Pete noticed that it said Metro North on the back of her uniform. He hadn't seen that before. It usually just said Conway. The train arrived at Grand Central about 20 minutes later. A group of buskers caught his ear and eye. 3 young women were singing Yes It Is. Please don't wear red tonight. It was one of Pete's most beloved Beatles songs. He looked again at his watch. He'd made good time on the train and had a few minutes to spare. He took another $5 bill from his wallet and placed it in the open guitar case, which already had plenty of bills and coins. The women finished the song with the word true in lovely lilting harmony. Thank you, the lead singer, a woman with long blonde hair, said to him. The other 2 were blind. The 3 reminded Pete of the Bangles. You were wonderful, Pete said. Do you do requests? The lead singer nodded. How about real life? Pete asked. The woman scrunched her face. You mean real love? I think I read in Rolling Stone that Real Life was the original name of the song. Pete shook his head and laughed. He'd read every issue of Rolling Stone and had never seen any article or review or interview that said that. He certainly didn't want to insult these singers and tell them he was Pete Fornatale, and he no doubt knew much more than they did about the Beatles. Okay, well, could you play me that song then? Pete asked. The women nodded and began singing. Exactly the same as Real Life, except they were now singing, It's Real Love. Thank you, Pete said when they were finished, and impulsively reached into his wallet. All he had was a $10 bill and a $20 bill. He put the 10 into the open guitar case with a flourish. You deserve it, he said. Isn't that President Reagan? One of the women asked. Pete nodded. When did they change the guy on the money? One of the other women asked. Alexander Hamilton's on my $10 bills. Pete didn't know what to say. He looked at his watch. If he stayed here much longer, he'd be late for his appointment. He pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and called one of the WNET people he was supposed to meet. The phone rang and rang and rang with no answer and no voicemail. He put the phone back in his pocket. He didn't really care about the pictures on the money. He cared about WNET, but he cared most about the Beatles. Can you tell me all you know about that song? He asked gently. The women looked at each other. The first one he had talked to looked up at him and considered it. You gave us $5 of real money. Even if the $10 isn't real, I guess your $5 is worth a few minutes of conversation, she said. Thank you, Pete said. When did you last hear that song, if I could ask? I saw the video on MTV the other night, one of the women said. It was very moving. I don't think I've seen that, Pete said. What did you find moving about it? I mean, with Leonard and all, it was very emotional, she said. Yeah, Pete said. John always has a voice that pulls at your heart. And seeing him come back to life on that video, on this song, it was really something. One of the other women who hadn't spoken before said, there was something like tears in her eyes. Pete opened his mouth to say something, but stopped. This was getting crazier by the minute. What do you mean, come back to life? He asked slowly. Something happened to John Lennon that he somehow hadn't heard about? Impossible. Now all three women looked at him with expressions from suspicious to amazed. He was assassinated in 1980, right? The woman with the long blonde hair finally asked him in a husky voice. No, I don't, he thought to himself. To the buskers, he said, look, thank you. You have a lot of talent. Apologies for my interruption. He opened his wallet for the 20, but thought the better of it. He might need it for other things. He reached in his pocket and found 2 quarters. Thanks, he said again and put them in the guitar case. They had George Washington on them. They're real, right? All 3 women nodded. Thanks, Pete said again, and he hurried away. There had to be a bookstore with an encyclopedia in or near Grand Central. Pete found a Barnes & Noble on Fifth Avenue. He walked as quickly and inconspicuously as he could to the reference book section. He picked up a World Encyclopedia and turned to the Beatles. Oh my God. He felt sick to his stomach. The women were right. It said here that John Lennon had been shot to death in December 1980. Pete frantically picked up another encyclopedia and opened it to the Beatles, and then another and another. God almighty, same thing, same thing. What the hell was going on? Pete half sat, half collapsed on a plush chair and pondered what to do. The air conditioning felt too cold. He realized he'd broken out into a cold sweat. He was going crazy. He felt weak. He hoped he wasn't having a heart attack. He was in no condition to see the WNET people now, even if he wanted to, which he didn't. The best thing was to return to what he knew, Fordham University, where all of this had started. Or maybe it had started when he'd encountered the girl group who looked like the Bangles and sang like the Beatles. Pete wasn't sure. No, he was. This losing his mind was all a piece of when he had played real life on his show. That had unnerved him, as it always did. He walked through the tunnels for some peace. He'd taken the train to Grand Central Station, and then this. Whatever it was not peace. He needed some caffeine or maybe a drink. Yeah, that would calm him down. But no, he needed a clear head. He needed some coffee. Thank goodness they were now serving it here. He got up shakily, tried to relax, walked carefully to the coffee bar. He ordered a coffee, jet black. He took out his wallet, took out his $20 bill, and had another jolt of anxiety. He hoped the woman behind the counter didn't think this was funny money, like the singers in Grand Central Station did about his tent spot. If she did, he might not only be unable to pay for this coffee, how would he pay for the ticket back to Fordham? He had an American Express card at home, but he didn't like to use it. He looked at his $20 bill. Andrew Jackson was on it. He took his coffee, gave the bill to the cashier. He shut his eyes and prayed. Here's your change, sir, she said. Are you okay? Pete smiled. Yes, fine, thank you. Of course he wasn't okay. Not by a long shot. But at least he'd have no problem getting back to the Bronx and maybe sorting this out. At least he hoped so. He sat at a small table and sipped. And I think I will end my reading of the story right there. Hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like to find out what happened, again, you can read the story free of charge on Vocal, VOCAL. Search for the story. It's real life. And my name and the story will come up. And eventually, with any luck, maybe next year by this time, there'll be a novel with that title, with this story, and a whole bunch of other alternate reality stories relating both to the Beatles and Fordham University. Thanks again.
Okay, does anybody in the studio audience want to ask a question, make a comment? Just unmute. Well, let's see. Can I, as the power, it has to be a way,
Yeah, you should be able to unmute them.
ask to unmute.
No, now they're muted again.
Yeah.
Now they're unmuted.
Okay.
Is there anybody there? All I have are just the words. I can't see any people.
Yeah, I'm seeing them as muted.
All right. On my screen, it says not muted, but again, it's just the word Keycon board, not.
Yeah, that's all I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's to unmute. Okay. Okay. Well, we're either technical glitches, and hopefully there is somebody there, because I will say there, the naming, the reason that I have so many things like feline-zoid, otter-zoid, calentriozoid in Freedom's Law is explained in Cloning Freedom, the first book of the series, that most species cannot produce the sounds or hear the sounds or whatever medium that creatures use for their own languages. And the translator nanobots are implanted in the brain, and they translate language to a binary signal, which is transmitted to the translator nanobots in the next person's brain that turns it back into their own primary language. So the convention is, for naming the alien species, to pick a species that that alien superficially resembles from your homeworld and add a prefix or suffix. So feline zoids, because they resemble large felines. Calentriozoids, because they resemble jellyfish. Aside from a superficial resemblance, there is no real, they're not of the genetic ilk, as it were, but it's just the way of making a convention work with a limited technology. And it also is a nice writing conceit, because I can say otterzoid and people have a fairly quick idea of what my alien looks like. And then I can build on that.
All right.
It's always different. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's very interesting. I did enjoy your reading.
Yeah, I enjoyed, well, I love the Beatles music as much as I love any music. I'm a little tone deaf. And it was just sort of interesting that, yeah, I take it he's from a parallel Earth where Lennon wasn't assassinated.
Right. Parallel reality. That's right.
Yeah.